Hey guys, Eli here. A little late coming in this video, but I'm doing a response video. I think that's what you call it, response video, to Pat from Ground Zero Salem. I don't remember what he called it, Missteps and something like that. Anyway, it's a video where he talked about albums that were either like commercial flops or kind of like, you know, hated by a lot of the fans, but albums that he thinks are total rippers. So that's what I'm going to do. I've actually thought about doing a video like that myself previously, so he just kind of reminded me of what a cool idea it is. And so basically I kind of compiled some fucking albums out of my collection. I kind of put a little bit of a different spin on it just because they were albums that didn't really fall into that category and I wanted to talk about them. So it's kind of a combination of albums that I thought were commercial flops or, you know, disliked by most fans when they came out, but I also mixed in some albums that I just thought were generally underrated, or kind of, you know, underrated and kind of went under the radar, and I thought it was kind of a travesty. But so yeah, this might be a video sort of on the long side, so if you can tolerate me for that long, that's awesome. It's a decent stack. It's probably close to 20 albums, maybe even more than 20. I didn't count them. So anyway, it's a good stack. Clearly I'm listening to British Steel by Judas Priest. This is the album, this is my introduction to the band. The first album that I got from them. Loved it. At this point, it's not near, I mean, it doesn't rank very high among my top Priest albums, but it's probably been 10, 15 years since I've heard it, but I figured why not. I also cut all my hair off. I didn't have much for hair anyway. I'd been fucking, it's time to face the facts. my hair had been thinning out for the last like 7 years, so I didn't want to be seen as one of those fucking dudes that was trying to hold on to that shit, so I let myself go. Fucking, it's all downhill from here, right? I've been drinking a lot of these lately, actually. I'm not the biggest beer snob, or I'm kind of a connoisseur, I guess you could say, but I don't think I've ever had a white IPA before. But I've been drinking a lot of these lately, Sharkinator. Clearly I bought it for the label, but I think it's pretty tasty beer. It's brewed Northern California, pretty close to where I was born and raised. Tasty. If you can find it, try it out. I don't know. It's good. I like it. I'm no expert. I also wanted to say, a lot of you have added me on Facebook previously, and that was awesome. I just wanted to say, if you've been looking for me on Facebook, or maybe meant to talk to me or something like that, and you don't find me anymore, I didn't delete you or block you. I deleted my Facebook profile. I'm done with Facebook. I'm never gonna go back. Man, I've been on Facebook for like 7 years, and I swear to fucking God, man, every fucking day I got more and more sick of it. I was getting to the point where even my friends and family I was getting sick of. Facebook just brings out the fucking ugly side of humanity, even in people that you care about. And I want to see that anymore. No more Facebook for me. I will never go back. If you wanna talk to me or something like that outside of YouTube, comment or something like that, I'll give you my email address, or maybe I'll just post my email address down below. I still want to talk to you guys. Oh, and by the way, I kept, I guess you're allowed to keep the Facebook Messenger app. So if we've talked previously on Facebook, if you have like a saved conversation on your computer or your phone or something like that, you can still talk to me. Yeah, I believe you might even be able to search for me. I don't know. You can talk to me on Facebook Messenger still. I kept that app because I use it. Basically, all my friends. That's what we use. That's how we talk. So, anyways, I just wanted to say that it probably doesn't hold much weight, but thought it had to be said. Let's get on to the music. There's almost 4.5 minutes. I probably have lost 90% of anyone who started the video. I'm like, is this guy gonna fucking talk about music, or is he gonna ramble about Facebook and his hatred for, you know, the world, and his fucking male pattern baldingness or whatever. Let's go. Let's fucking start this. These are albums that I consider to be underrated or whatever, undeservedly hated. Now we're gonna start with this one, man. I know a lot of you guys aren't gonna agree with me on this, but Massacre, Promise. I'm just kidding. This album is a piece of shit. Yeah, I've been planning this for a long time. This album fucking sucks, man. We all know it. I love the debut Massacre album. I love the demos and everything, but there is no... I don't think anyone... Has anyone ever defended this? Seriously, if you've ever heard or read anything of anyone defending this, please chime in. I want to hear about it. This album is a fucking piece of shit. I bought it years and years ago. You know, obviously before I knew it was a piece of shit, so I still own it, and I should just throw it away or use it as a coaster or something, or just smash it when I'm pissed off and want to break something. Yeah, there's no redeeming qualities to this album. Not one. I mean, if anyone disagrees, let me know. I won't argue with you. I'll listen. In my opinion, no redeeming qualities. Fuck this album. Alright, let's get on to the seriousness. We're going to start with, this is one of my favorite metal albums of all time, really. I fucking love it. I feel like people in the last, I don't know, at least from what I've noticed in the last 10 years, more people have came around to it, I think. It was received when it came out, from what I understand, because I was pretty young. I don't obviously remember it, but from what I understand, it was received fairly well. It wasn't a commercial flop, but it was in an era of this band where their popularity was had taken a massive dive, even years before this. Black Sabbath, Headless Cross, one of my all-time favorite albums. I did a Black Sabbath video earlier this year. Not many people cared for it, and I said it was my favorite Black Sabbath album, and I still, to this day, Louis is chewing on his toy. Annoying, but whatever. I'm not going to stop him. My favorite, at this point in my life, it is my favorite Sabbath album. I know that might be weird to a lot of you. I don't care. It doesn't have to be your favorite album, but it is mine. I've listened to every Sabbath album dozens of times, and since I was a teenager, so over 20 years. And at this point in my life, that's what it is. So anyways, I do feel like it's underrated as an album, and as an album in Sabbath's discography. Tony Martin's vocals alone, to me, are worth listening to the album. And it has, it's got songs, man. It's got riffs, it's got songs, it's memorable, it's catchy, it's dark. I fucking love it. Yeah. Next, we have 90215 by Yes. Now I understand Owner of a Lonely Heart was a massive hit. This album might have even gone, I don't know. I don't know what sales were like, but this album might have gone platinum, to be honest. So you're probably thinking, like, how was that a commercial flop when it was a commercial success? A lot of diehard Yes fans don't like this album, and many, probably the majority of prog fans, true prog fans, don't like it. And I know that for a fact. A lot do, but most don't. Simply for the fact that, you know, Yes, they were trying to stay relevant. You know, this came out in '83. Prog rock, you know, it wasn't as popular as it was in the '70s. You know, they wanted to survive. They weren't ready to throw in the towel, and they knew what they were doing. You know, it still has progressive moments, and there's some killer guitar work on here by Steve Howe. Some excellent stuff. A lot of good songs. Still great musicianship. Just it didn't have the 20-minute, prog stuff. A lot of pop. There's a lot of pop on this album. As prog rock in the '80s, that was kind of, at least commercially, that was the direction it was taking. The prog rock bands of the '70s, most of them were getting poppier in the '80s because they wanted to survive. And like it or not, it does make some sense. You just gotta spend way too much time thinking about it, like I did, and have. Next, this is pretty similar to the one I just showed in terms of the story of the album and the band. Sorry. Genesis, Invisible Touch. This came out in 1986. So Prague. Why did I show the back? It's something special. The Prague by '86 was. There weren't a whole lot of bands doing it, especially, like I said, all the popular prog bands from the '70s. I mean, how many of them were staying true to their roots? Really, not very many. I grew up on this album. I've listened to it hundreds of times, so I'm a little bit biased. But I fucking love this album. And it still does have quite a few prog touches, and in many ways, it's like a Phil Collins pop album, really. There's no denying that. There's no denying Phil's influence. But I still think it's a great album. Most Genesis fans, a lot of Genesis fans, hate the direction that this band went in, and they hate this album. A lot of prog fans hate this album, but I disagree. I love it. Like I said, it might be because I grew up on it, but I return to it a lot, and I think it's better. And once again, that album was very popular. It sold a lot. It probably went platinum, maybe several times. But I'm talking about, it wasn't a commercial flop, but as far as diehard prog fans, I think it's a little bit disrespected and underrated. Next up, we have an album from a band. I talk about them fairly often. This was their final album and possibly their best album, and I have never seen a review for it. I'm sure someone did a review, probably multiple metal magazines and metal websites, but I haven't seen it, and I find that disappointing. Acheron, Cult de Hasis. I can't pronounce that. But anyways, this was their final album. They broke up this year. Can I say for good? I don't know. Vincent Crowley, I think he's kind of an emotional guy. He breaks up Acheron a lot and then brings them back a lot. But for now, he claims that they're done. And this album's phenomenal, man. I think this was one of the better death metal albums from last year. I think it came out last year. Fuck. Whatever year it came out. Last year. It might have been 2015. I think this was one of the better death metal albums that I feel like went under the radar, man. If you like Acheron and you didn't hear this, you fucked up bad. I mean, this album is worth your time. It's worth your money. And if you just like death metal in general, if you like death metal, old school style death metal with neoclassical guitar solos and stuff like that, check it out, man. Check it out either way. I thought it was a fantastic album, and it did not get near the respect that it should have. Next, I can't really say for sure, how most people feel about this album, but what I clearly remember from some of my friends and some of the shit that I saw online, I'm not a huge internet nerd, but I feel like I heard more negative things than good, and it rubbed me the wrong way, and it rubbed me the wrong way at the time, and I stand by that. This was the last album that Aura Noir never put out, or ever put out. What the fuck? The glare, man. It's nighttime. Where's this glare coming from? Out to Die, Aura Noir. Yeah, man. This came out in 2012. But it feels like it was more recent. But anyway, this album is fucking killer. This is one of my favorite Aura Noir albums. Look up Fed to the Flames. If you haven't heard this album, just Fed to the Flames. Check that one out. And Out to Die. Really listen to the whole album. Check out Out to Die and Fed to the Flames. I mean, this is just some nasty black thrash. I don't know from what some of my friends felt like it wasn't as raw as the earlier stuff. It wasn't as nasty, but I disagree, man. This is just like Venom meets Sodom meets Motorhead. I fucking love it. It's catchy, and I think it's really fucking dirty. I think this is a filthy album. I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand the people that disliked it. I think it's a killer release. I think it stands among their best work easily. I think it stands next to anything they did. Easily. It's very worthy. Next, I'm gonna lose some people on this one, but once again, I'm an honest motherfucker, and I don't care. I like this band. I got into them in the 90s. I don't listen to them nearly as much anymore. And some other stuff I don't care for as much as some of it. But anyways, this is an album that kind of left a mark. And I've been listening to it actually quite a bit recently. And I feel like I like it more than ever now. That is Smashing Pumpkins' Machina. Let's call it Machina, the Machines of God. This was the final album of Smashing Pumpkins originally, the original lineup basically, before Billy Corgan reunited, or, you know, resurrected the project, I don't know, 5 years back, maybe more. Anyways, this album is considered to be, at least of the original albums, this is considered to be their worst album, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's the general consensus. I don't know, man. It's got... There's some filler on this album. And by the way, if you're sitting there judging me about liking Smashing Pumpkins, guess who was a big Smashing Pumpkins fan? Quarthan from Bathory. There you go. I just ruined your night, but anyone that's left, I'm going to continue to talk about this. There's some filler on here for sure. But there's also some great moments of just in music in general. One of my favorite songs recently. For some reason I've really gotten into this song in the last couple of years. It's, I don't know, resonates with me. Glass and the Ghost Children. Look that up. Fantastic song. I fucking love it. The Everlasting Gaze I thought was a killer song. Raindrops and Sun Showers. I know that sounds fucking stupid, but that's the name of the song. I didn't name it. Stand Inside Your Love. Also a stupid title, but it's a great song. There's some really good shit on here. Smashing Pumpkins were doing something different. It's kind of got a, I don't know if industrial feel, I guess. Gothic, maybe. I don't listen to shit like that too much. Nine Inch Nails-y type noisy stuff. I don't know, man. I think it's a killer album. It does have its flaws, for sure. But the shining moments on this album are, for me, really well done and not deserving of... I don't know, a lot of Smashing Pumpkins fans are probably not on the same level as me, at least as far as taste goes, but I don't think it deserves to be as hated as it was. Obviously, that's the reoccurring theme here. I'm done, I'll quit. If there's anyone left, man, there's probably you can probably hear crickets, but there's got to be one or two you left. I'm going to see this to the end, and maybe you will too. Moving on. We have an album. This album isn't necessarily disliked, but I know for a fact not that many people have heard this. Yeah, and I'll talk about why in a second because I'm trying to drink my beer here. This is a band that was never very popular, but I always felt like deserved a bigger audience. I know a lot of people do like this band, but many people have really never heard them. We got Nocturnal with Theory Unleashed. Nocturnal, you might remember, if you're an old school guy, you might remember they had an album out in like '93 on JL America called Nothing But Hatred. That album, Nocturnal, a lot of people, I mean, if you're old school, if you've been listening to death metal since the '90s, you probably know who they are. I mean, they toured. They didn't really tour, actually. They played a lot of shows on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey area. I mean, they played with, like, Incantation, Ripping Corpse, Mortician, Immolation, Deceased. They played a lot of shows on the East Coast. A lot of memorable shows, too, on the East Coast in the early 90s. However, they did nothing. I mean, they did a full length, some demo stuff, I think a couple EPs, but really they were silent for a long time. Tom Stevens of Nocturnal resurrected this band single-handedly. He does everything on this album except for drums. He doesn't play drums, so he hires drummers and shit. But anyways, let's talk about Nocturnal's music. Nocturnal, at its core, is death metal. I'd say there's a lot of thrash influences, a lot of Voivod influences going on. It's pretty technical music, but not technical in the way... I wouldn't call it technical death metal. I would call it just really manic death metal with thrash influences, and just really crazy, chaotic, and pretty skilled solos. I mean, every Nocturnal song is packed full of solos, and is pretty manic sounding. I would call it technical. I don't know, man, but I don't like to use the term technical death metal because that just has kind of a bad connotation to it. But anyways, if you like death metal and you like Voivod, you like brutal thrash, look into Nocturnal, man. If you haven't heard them, yeah, look into them. You need to. Underrated all across the board. I believe that, and I know other people do too. Next, we have a band that is, as far as popular black metal goes, this is one of the more shit-talked black metal bands, and for what reason, I don't honestly know. Maybe, you know, some of you might, but I really don't. I don't know. I'm not sure. The band in question, and I've talked about this album before, it's 1349. Album being Hellfire. I picked Hellfire because this is, I believe this to be their best work. Like I said, a lot of people hate 1349. Maybe it's because they got popular. I don't know. I've heard all their stuff, and I think this crushes everything they've ever done. I mean, and if you're on the fence with this band, just look up one song. Look up Hellfire, the title track. That's all. That's all I have to say. I mean, it's a fucking badass song. I think 1349 are pretty cool. A couple missteps maybe in their discography, but I don't necessarily think they're amazing or anything. But I mostly like this album. I do like some of their other stuff. Some of their more recent work actually has been pretty good. But this is the album that I reached for, you know, when I wanted to 1349. Like I said, I don't know why the band is hated so much. Maybe some of you guys do, but this album is not something that I think should be hated by any means. It's pretty fucking furious. Next up, here's an album. Once again, I feel like this album was shit-talked way more than you know, the good things that have been said about it. It's one of my favorite death metal bands, Vital Remains, Icons of Evil. I always have to pull it out because the cover is just so cool. Hammer Smashed Christ. There's nothing cooler than that. Anyways, Vital Remains. First of all, I've always thought Vital Remains were one. You know, are they popular? I guess you could say they are. But out of the popular death metal bands, I've always felt like they're the most underrated. Is it as good as Dechristianized that came out before it? No. It's kind of like a... It's like Dechristianized, but it lacks a lot of what Dechristianized brought to the table. However, it's still very good. I mean, I know the songs are really long. It's got some they drag on a little longer than they should. But fact remains, I fucking love this album, and there was a lot of bitching when it came out, and I don't really agree with 90% of it. I think this album fucking slays. End of story. It's, yeah, underrated. By the way, all these albums that I'm talking about, most of these aren't my personal, you know, pick from whatever, you know, from each band. I don't think these are the best albums these bands have done. I think they're underrated in their discography. So just keep that in mind. This one, I think I just wanted an avenue to talk about it. I don't know. I don't know how well this album was liked. I don't know how the sales were. I don't know. Because I don't know anyone else really that likes this band. And anyways, this is the most recent album. Came out in 2015. The most recent album from Toto. And it's called 14. 14? Yeah, 14. Is it their 14th album? I don't really know. I like a lot of Toto. I never really listened to Toto until the last 5 years, and I certainly don't like everything they've done. In fact, most of all of their albums really are pretty much a handful of tracks I really like, and then a handful of tracks I don't give a shit about. But anyways, I feel like this album, this was honestly one of my favorite albums from 2015. In general, yeah, I feel weird. I feel weird saying that. I'll be honest. I don't talk about Toto very often, but I thought this album was strong as fuck. The first, once again though, I mean, I really love about a third of the album. Another third of it I think is okay, and then a third of it I think is, at least for me, filler. Stuff that doesn't quite resonate with me, not really my cup of tea. But I thought this album, for a band that had been around since the 80s, I thought this was incredible. I thought it was a great, was it a comeback? I don't know. I just thought it was a really strong album, you know, from a band that has been around for as long as they have. As strong as it gets, really, to be honest. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, Toto are one of those bands, I kind of have a soft spot for, like, 80s kind of proggy, poppy rock. You know, they were one of the bands that did it really well, and this album is no exception. No exception? Does that make sense? I don't know. Whatever. Let's move on, man. This is an album, like some of these, I don't know where they sit as far as popularity goes, but I do know that I have never heard anyone talk about this album. I think Metal Archives does have 2 reviews, and they're both very high. I don't ever see people talk about this album, ever. I don't even personally know anyone that's heard it, I don't think. And that was the last album that Nostrand did. Nostrand from Sweden, black metal. You know, they started in the early 90s, put out a couple of pretty classic full lengths, did some other weird stuff, some demos, some splits, some EPs. Not a huge discography by any means. This album came out in 2008. I bought it back then. Came out in the Beamer Morty and Moribund Records. That was the slipcover. Here's the regular cover. Really, really, really fucking cool artwork. The Strand, man. This is a band that I've been intrigued with for a long time. I feel like, I don't know why, but I've heard all their stuff over and over again, and this is my favorite album of theirs. Why? I'm not really sure. I really can't say. It's just, for some reason, since the first few times I heard it, I don't know. I mean, their 90s stuff is, to me, is classic black metal, but I reach for this one more often. I don't know why. It's got a very unique atmosphere. It's raw. It's atmospheric. It's pacing. It's almost dreamlike. I don't know why, man. I listen to this album a lot, like when I'm falling asleep. That's my sleepy time music. Let me know. Let's talk about Nostrand. If you're gonna talk to me about anything, any of these albums, let's talk about Nostrand. And yes, I just did show a Toto album and then a Nostrand album. I don't consider myself, my taste to be all that eclectic, necessarily, but, I don't know. I guess as you get older, you listen to a bigger variety of shit. I never saw it coming, but it happened. Next. I know, I'm going to probably lose a lot of people on these albums, but I think a lot of you will have shit to say also. This is almost half an hour video, too. This is going to be my longest video ever. I hope at least 1 or 2 of you watch it all. But really, I don't care, actually. Yeah. We have Volcano by Satyricon. I love Satyricon. I'm a big fucking fan of their early work. One of my favorite black metal albums, or bands of all time. The beer's getting to me. But anyways, this album, as far as the albums beyond the 90s, beyond the classic material, I feel like this is their best. I feel like everything they've done after this has been, you know, nothing has topped this since this album. All the earlier albums are better than this, but they haven't done anything better than this since this came out. And that's kind of a bummer, but whatever. I mean, it fucking happens. This album, this came out in 2002, and this was my introduction to Satyricon, I think. I might have heard some shit from, like, Nemesis Divina before this, but this was the first album that I actually went out and bought from Satyricon. And I'm pretty sure I instantly liked it. I don't remember for sure. It might have been a grower for me. But, I mean, as far in Satyricon's discography, it's kind of a unique album. I mean, yeah, it kind of had a lot of the rocking elements, the black and roll elements that they would have later on, but they were done better on this album, and they were done differently. And this album, honestly, I think this album is pretty unique. It doesn't sound like any of the Satyricon that came before it. It doesn't much sound like any of the Satyricon that came after it. It's another album with, I feel, with a pretty unique atmosphere. I really couldn't compare. I really couldn't compare much to it, to be honest, out of anything I've ever heard. It's great, man. And it's got a lot of variety on it. I've heard some people say they think it's boring, but I mean, it's got you know, some thrash sounding stuff. It's got some droning atmospheric stuff. It's got, I don't know, it's just kind of all over the board, and I guess that's why I like it. Fuck, I'm gonna have to start going a little faster because I still have another like 10 albums to show. I'm gonna pick up the pace here. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm apologizing. I've also talked about this album a lot. It's a band that I very dear to my heart, and it is my favorite album by them. As Morbid Angel, Domination. A lot of people don't like it, man. This is their 95 album. 95, I think. I could be wrong. Anyways, yeah, 95. I don't know, man. It's just, to me, I mean, it's a lot more experimental sounding, and I wish they would have done more stuff that sounds like Inquisition, Hate Work, Where the Slime Live. I wish they would have done more stuff like that. I like most of Morbid Angel, minus their last 2 albums. I really love everything that they've done. This is my favorite album by them. I know that's weird to say, but I'm not gonna lie about it. I know a lot of people like it, but I think in the death metal world, more people hate it than people that like it, and I think that's, to me, that's weird. So sorry. Here is an album by a band that I really fucking love. This is one of my all-time favorites from Brazil or anywhere in the world. Mystifier. This is their most recent album, which has been a while. Fucking 2003. They keep talking about a new album, and it never fucking happens. Anyway, this is their most recent album, Profanus, and I'm talking about it because I've never heard anyone talk about it ever, and it's got a bit of a different sound than the early stuff. It's a little bit more streamlined. It's a little bit more rocking. It's a little bit more simple, but it's really fucking good. I think this album rules. I've never heard anyone talk about it, literally ever. People talk about Mystifier all the time, and this album never comes up. It's got, I mean, it's a little bit less creepy and occult sounding, maybe a little less aggressive. It's got more of like just kind of more simpler song structures, but it's got a lot more like classic heavy metal influences. And honestly, I think it really works. This is not my favorite album by them, but I listen to this album all the time. And, I mean, it hits the spot every single fucking time. It's also cool that Armando in that picture has got the same Absu shirt that I have. I actually just now noticed that. Armando's cool. Armando wins. But anyway, yeah, I don't know why this album... It's not so much that I think it's hated, but I don't hear people talk about it ever, and I think that it's probably, definitely underappreciated. I fucking love Mystifier, by the way. I couldn't say it enough. Next, this is an album that's been talked about a lot, and like a lot of these albums, I feel like more people hate this than, you know, the people that like it. And while I do understand that, because I used to hate this album, in recent years I've changed my mind. Hold on. That album being Mayhem's Grand Declaration of War. I know right now you're like, what the fuck, man? That album sucks. I don't know, I'm not going to change your mind necessarily, but I don't think it sucks. Although I used to think it sucked. Some of the more experimental parts, some of the vocals on here, I don't know. Some of the vocals, you know what I'm talking about. Some of the vocal patterns on here, I think, probably shouldn't have been done the way that they were. At least that to please me more, I would have changed some of the vocals. Other than that, though, this was Mayhem experimenting, as they often do. Mayhem are always experimenting. They're not a band that wants to repeat themselves, and they really never have. A lot of people consider this a misstep in their discography. Like I said, I used to think that too, but revisiting it over the last 10 years, I've grown to appreciate it a lot more. I wouldn't want them to put out an album sounding like this every time, but they were experimenting, and I feel like, honestly, it's more of a success than a misstep. And yeah, I think it's killer. It's kind of middle of the road as far as Mayhem albums for me, but I think it's better than a lot of people, a lot of people think. Next, here's an album. One more. I mean, this album is fairly popular. I think it's well liked by a lot of people, but I think it's skipped over by a lot of people as well that I think shouldn't have skipped over it. Misfits, American Psycho. I know this is weird. I'm a big Danzig fan. I'm a massive Danzig fan, and you can see a poster up there. Love Danzig. Danzig Misfits, to me, is cool. I'm not a big punk fan. I'm not even necessarily the biggest Misfits fan, but I like the Michael Graves stuff. The two studio albums that he did they're my go-to Misfits albums. In fact, the album that came out after this called Famous Monsters is, I think, even better than this one. But I grabbed this one. I don't know why. I feel like a lot of punk fans weren't a big fan of this. A lot of them passed over it. A lot of the diehard Misfits fans passed over it because, I don't know, I guess because Danzig wasn't in the band. They had a different singer. Michael Graves kills it. I think Michael Graves in punk, for me, one of the best vocalists ever. I don't know what he's doing nowadays. It's a bummer. I think had he stayed in the Misfits, I think it would have been a little more interesting than what they've done lately. But the two albums that he was on, I think, are masterpieces, really. And I think, I think they were overlooked, and I don't think enough people gave it a chance just simply for the fact that Glenn Danzig wasn't in the band. And yeah, it was a shame, but whatever, man, your loss. If you're hanging in there, I only have a couple left, so whatever. Thank you. Here's an album that I have. How would I describe the overall feeling I think a lot of people have for this? I think it's a 50-50 thing. I think half the people hate it, half the people like it. Fight, War of Words. If you don't know who Fight are, this is Rob Halford's band after he left Judas Priest. It doesn't sound like Judas Priest really much. It's more of a thrash band. Maybe you could say some groove influences. Rob was really into Pantera at this time. I don't know what he was thinking, but he was, and that's a fact. I don't think it sounds like Pantera personally. Fight did 2 albums. They did this one, which I think is absolutely killer. Kind of I would call it a thrash album for the most part. The album after this, they were going in a different direction, and I don't think it worked at all. It's not a very good album, but I think this album fucking kills. There are vocal-wise, it's not the Rob Halford that I want to hear. He's not screaming his lungs off, hitting high notes and shit like he did in Priest. It was a more, at least for the time, it was more of a modern sounding album. He's more of still killing it, but more mid-range, more mid-range. But there are there's some killer riffs on this album and some killer songs, to be honest. And the people that dismissed it just for whatever reason, I don't know. I don't think enough people gave this a chance. And speaking of Priest, speaking of Rob Halford, this is one of my favorite Priest albums, and I can't even imagine how many people are going to disagree with me on this one. Jugulator. Yeah, there you go. I said it. I fucking love this album. I loved Painkiller. Painkiller is actually my favorite Priest album, and this one was a worthy kind of a Painkiller Part 2. Rob Halford left the band. In comes Tim Ripper Owens, who, I mean, this was, for him coming into Priest, just, being new blood in the band, his performance on this album is undeniable. I mean, he's fucking, honestly, half the time I think he's trying to outdo Rob, and half the time I think he does outdo Rob. I don't know, man. There are some songs and some moments on here where it gets kind of redundant. I mean, they were trying to be more aggressive. The songwriting isn't nearly as brilliant as Painkiller was. I think Painkiller is brilliant. But if there's one song on here that I want you to check out, that's Cathedral Spires. That song is undeniably good. I've heard people that don't like this album